All right, so it's been about a week since the balance patch has come out, and we've kind of seen how everything has leveled, where we're at, what's everyone doing.
All right, who's not dead?
I'm going to talk about the specs that are doing very well, and then I'm also going to talk about the specs who have seen a lot of changes and have maybe lost their identity. So let's go ahead and get into this. First and foremost, one of the big wins, and I was very happy to see it, came through the Elementalist. For the Elementalist, they saw a lot of positive changes, specifically for the daggers, as well as for the catalyst. So Double Dagger Elementalist is very fast and fluid gameplay. It has you scooting all across the battlefield and using heavy hitting abilities very quickly. It's meant to be more of a skirmisher and a fast-paced fighter, except for their Earth offhand dagger ability, which was churning Earth. Essentially, you would be stationary for 2 seconds while you charge up a big hit and hoping to hit multiple enemies that were right there. That has been reworked. Now, essentially, you have a 1 second cast for an ability where you slam the ground, you deal a little bit less bleeding and a little bit less damage, but it happens very, very fast. And I think this really does complement the dagger playstyle. It's meant to be quick. You're meant to be fast. You're meant to be kind of all over the place. So slowing down to just do a charged ability didn't fit well, and I like this change.
Nice.
The other big win came through the Catalyst, and specifically not only their boon support capabilities, but their signets. So previously, the Catalyst had to spec into Spectacular Sphere, which allowed them to grant quickness whenever they used Air Sphere on a group, which essentially pigeonholed the Catalyst to camping in Air Attunement just to make sure that they were applying that quickness boon at a regular rate so that essentially they were good to go for what they needed to do. This hampered their DPS, but now with Spectacular Sphere, you can essentially drop any Jade Sphere and still apply quickness. This means that they'll be able to go through their damage rotation like normal, and also still keep up that important boon that they are essentially in the group for. So this is a positive change. This is fantastic. I wanted to mention that they reworked the Earth trait line ability written in stone. Previously, it reduces the cooldown of all signets and applies the passive effect even if you've already used the active effect and it's on cooldown. Now, every time that you use a signet, you are granted an aura. This is important for the Catalyst because the whole playstyle of the Catalyst is now they are able to have on-demand auras, 3 to 4 on-demand auras whenever they need to. One of the difficult kind of mini games with the Catalyst is to stay at 10 stacks of elemental empowerment, and usually you go into empowered empowerment, which doubles the effect. So you'll essentially get 20% increase to all of your stats across the board if you can maintain this. And you would have to play that aura minigame where you were essentially keeping all of your auras and finishing your combos within these fields so that you can keep up your DPS. That's kind of the mini game that you play. It is significantly easier now, and I found a lot of great success with Double Dagger Signet Catalyst. It's so good. But yes, overall, the Elementalist saw a win. Very, very, very good win. Now let's go ahead and talk about a loss. So the core engineer has had that same kind of mentality across the board as like the rest of the professions where they've lost all of their cooldown reduction abilities, which makes sense. Again, Cal Cohen has been really adamant about removing those trait lines out. So the engineer saw a lot of these go across the board and then just having the cooldowns baked into what the skills do. So that's great. The big loss for the Scrapper comes from their ability to apply quickness. Previously, the Scrapper was able to just drop their well abilities and apply quickness to a group. Essentially just a simple, you press the one button, you get the boon that you were there to do, and you can go back to doing what you were doing. So you could have a heal Scrapper or you can have a DPS Scrapper. I mean, there was a lot of really cool flexibility with that, and they were able to be a viable part. Now, their kinetic accelerators, which is a Grandmaster trait, which allowed them to apply quickness with their wells, has been reworked. You only get that quickness ability if the engineer or the Scrapper does a leap or a blast finisher within any of their wells, which has taken this sort of, I don't want to say mindless, but a less intense, well-driven quickness ability, this capability of applying this great boon, and essentially made it a really intense cooldown management game. And I know that there are some Scrappers who are like, well, that was my main focus in my group, and now it's like, well, I either have to change weapons or have to change my build or do something different to just apply what I was normally doing, because managing your wells and managing when you're dropping your blast finishers and holding them specifically so that you can get your finisher in to grant quickness to the group, it's kind of made it this, it's in an awkward state. So unfortunately right now I would say that the Scrapper has lost this balance patch and is suffering a little. One of the bigger winners, we'll say, in my opinion, is some of the changes to the Ranger. Now, this is kind of like a neutral ground. There's some people who have said that they like the changes with the Ranger, and specifically their Druid specialization. Other people are not as thrilled. So previously, the Druid was one of the, like, in my opinion, I saw Druids all over the place. They were fantastic at heal support, or just being supportive, I guess, across the board. I would see them, they have their Celestial Avatar offers a ton of healing. It's great. They have changed it. Guild Wars 2 has changed it to have the Rangers, especially the Druid specialization, to be balanced out to offer more DPS, more bleeding, and how their playstyle will change. This offers more of an alternative to just being a Druid support. Now you could be a Druid DPS, and especially a Condi DPS. And essentially the Druid is going to be able to, we'll say, decimate enemies with the amount of bleeding and conditions that they apply. They're applying bleeding basically when they disable foes, when they immobilize foes, which if you've ever dealt with an immobilized Druid, it is a pain in the neck because they have so many different immobilizations. Now, to be fair, the Druid still looks as if it can support and it can still heal and still offer all the great things that it was doing. It's just having a different iteration so that it can actually DPS a little bit better. So in my opinion, I think that this is a win. This gives a lot more versatility to the Druid, which even I was guilty of just viewing Druid as support. Druid is always support. And then in PvP, if I saw a Druid, I basically didn't even think it was a support. I knew it was an immobilized Druid and I didn't even want to deal with it.
Sir, are you listening to me, sir? Sir, I'm talking to you.
So, of course, you knew that I was going to talk about one of the biggest hitting losses, which is the Scourge. So, previously, the Scourge was known for being able to apply a ton of barriers, tons and tons and tons of barriers through all of its shades and its abilities. Well, they've essentially been nerfed heavily. They don't nearly apply as many barriers or have as much viability as they used to. The big thing is that they've scaled back all of the different abilities that are offering barrier, and they still do offer barrier, but it's a lot less. Now, what I think they're trying to do, and what I've seen with the Scourge, is now their Desert Empowerment, which is one of their Grandmaster traits, has been reworked to now apply Alacrity, which again is one of the bigger boons that we look to see in most endgame content, is now being applied every time they apply those barriers. So that is a kind of like change. However, they wanted to solidify, and it seems like they have, the Scourge is either being a Condi DPS or a Condi support DPS or a boon support DPS. It seems like it's a loss because there's plenty of people that I've talked about that just are not happy with how the Scourge has been changed. They liked playing heal Scourge and essentially being able to do a support role. Now, I can imagine that there would still be a lot of viability, specifically for the Strike mission Bone Skinner. However, it would be probably the boon support DPS, honestly. So, unfortunately, the Scourge has taken a heavy loss in what it was, and why a lot of people were excited about playing the Scourge now are maybe not so much. Okay, so this is actually kind of a funny win, and I don't know necessarily if it's going to stick, but it's something funny, hilarious kind of actually happening right now, and that is actually through the Daredevil. So previously, the Daredevil, specifically with their elite specialization weapon, the Staff, it wasn't used as often as, say, like a sword dagger or even pistols, or, I mean, there was a lot of other weapon choices that were more viable than the Staff. Now, the Staff chain attack abilities, so their first abilities have been amped up incredibly. The first two, not the third. So in this weapon strike chain, you have 1, 2, 3. Well, the first two in Staff Strike and Staff Bash have had a massive improvement in the amount of damage that they deal. And it's actually gotten to the hilarity of point where you do more DPS by breaking that auto attack chain after the second attack. So 1, 2, use something that breaks the auto attack chain, so a skill, an ability, dodge roll, what have you, and then do it again. Because if you use the third staff ability, it apparently nets in a DPS loss. Now, I don't see this affecting massive amounts of players. I really don't. This is probably going to be closer to the top end. I'm sure that even if you use all 3 of the auto attack chains, it's going to be negligible for most people. I think you're still able to do what you need to do, but I just think it's hilarious that someone figured this out, not to use the third ability. So in my opinion, that's a win. And also pairing with that is something unique, and I'll even level this as a quick mention, but the Daredevil as well as the Deadeye have seen some of those improvements. So one of the big changes that we have seen is from their trait line ability, Fire for Effect, which is, okay, that's pretty cool. It would grant boons to nearby allies. That's been reworked now. Essentially, every time you steal an item, or use your Deadeye's mark, your stolen item after using this trait is going to grant you quickness upon use, and it's steal time. So now your Deadeye can also play a boon support DPS by applying quickness and just stealing items and stealing time. So it just offers a different way to play, and I actually think that's pretty awesome, because previously the Deadeye was essentially just a shoot straight, go ahead, but this offers a lot more viability in group play because they're providing more value in a sense, and it's, let's be serious, who doesn't want to use a rifle? All right, so this is also something that I've noticed really across the board. The Thief has seen wins literally with all of its elite specializations. Now, personally, I don't play the Spectre much at all. However, I have seen a significant increase in the amount of players who are hopping on the Shadow Boy train. From what I can gather, the Spectre has seen a lot of changes oriented around how much damage it does, what it provides to groups, as well as just its overall supporting capabilities, and those stats are up. Personally, I messed around with my Spectre to see, well, how well it could do and what we were doing. I'm putting out some crazy condition damage mainly through Torment, while also being able to essentially stay in shadow form forever. I mean, it's absolutely insane. And then also the stealth attack in Shadow Squall it just puts out so much condition damage that even in open world and kind of like in a solo sense, it's doing really well. So I would also label the Spectre as a winner here, because it does seem that it is now really trying to fill that support role that it was, well, previously lacking. But now I'm starting to see quite a few more, so that's a good thing. And now I take this kind of as a win, but I'll leave this is more of a neutral, we'll say, a couple of neutral playstyles, and that's going to come through the Mesmer, specifically the Chronomancer and the Mirage. So starting out with the Chronomancer, their Grandmaster traits, essentially when you dropped a well previously, it would just apply either Alacrity or Quickness, depending on the Grandmaster trait that you chose. So it offers a bit of viability on the fly. They can fill a bunch of different quick DPS builds, boon support DPS builds. Now it has been changed so that every time that they choose these abilities, either the Grandmaster trait to offer Alacrity or Quickness, every time they summon a Phantasm, that's when they will apply that particular boon. It makes it a little bit more unique and keeps the Chronomancer from having to be locked in to only using their well abilities, since it's coming through their Phantasms, which offers up quite a bit of diversity. So that's pretty cool. That's awesome for Chronomancers out there, and especially those who want to still be viable without only having to apply wells. And then kind of a loss, maybe in a sense, is going to come through the Mirage. Now, as you guys know, if I were maining anything else, if I played anything else as a focus other than the Elementalist, it would be the Mirage. The Mirage now has both of their dodges, both Mirage Cloaks, in PvP and World v World. Previously, they only had one. Now, they have made it more along the lines of a dodge roll. Previously, the Mirage Cloak, you could use your dodge while you were stunned, while you were immobilized, and essentially get out of jail free. However, that did burn your one dodge, so you kind of had to be careful with it. Now they have given them two dodges, but have removed that ability. You cannot dodge, or you cannot use your Mirage Cloak while you were stunned or while you were immobilized or anything like that. So it changes up the playstyle, but also gives you a little bit more versatility. I kind of take that as a loss, though, is because it required meticulous play and timing, specifically timing, of when to use your Mirage Cloak. Now, to be fair, they have made some changes across the board elsewhere that have made it a little bit more viable, specifically for the Grandmaster trait in the Mirage trait line for Elusive Mind. In PvP and World v World, it used to remove 2 conditions every time that you use Mirage Cloak or your dodge roll. Now, essentially, it only removes 1, which makes sense because now you have 2 dodges, but it also removes conditions and it also activates if you hit any of your Mirage mirrors. So that's pretty cool. I'll take that. That's kind of like a middle ground that I'm all right with. I don't like having the additional dodge and being able to essentially pump out more Mirage Cloaks. I liked having that. Essentially, it's a stun break. It's a free stun break, and I'm on the fence about it. So there's lots of really cool things happening, and especially with Guild Wars 2 Secrets of the Obscure on the horizon coming up, there's lots of things to start getting into your head of what you should do and what you need to do before you get there. So check out this video right here, which is going to cover all the things that I'm going to be working on here in the next month or so to get myself ready for this new expansion. Anyway, have a great day. Stay caffeinated, folks.